Welcome back and thanks for joining me again as we speak about Elasticache and Redshift in this lesson. Starting with Elasticache. So, what is Elasticache? Elasticache is a data caching service used to improve speed and performance of your web applications on AWS. Now, you might have heard of this word caching before. Well, if you take a step back and recall concepts about caching the content, we are referring to CloudFront. Yes, in CloudFront lesson, we spoke about the data being cached at various locations around the world so that your users or your customers can access that data faster. Now, this concept of Elasticache is very similar to what we see here with caching and databases. Now, in this case, we are not caching the content across the locations all around the world, but it's actually being cached in the memory because memory in cache always improves the overall performance of your application. You would agree with me if I say accessing information from memory or RAM is much faster than accessing information from hard drives. Now, this concept of memory being fast led to the rise of usage of memory by enterprise grade applications. Elasticache is a web service that makes it easy to deploy, operate, and scale the in memory data store cache in the cloud. What you get with this is high performance delivered by your web applications because you're now accessing your information from the memory instead of relying on disk. And now you get all the great characteristics like fast, managed, secure, in memory, and of course, customers' appreciation because you now have the best performance delivered by Elasticache. Because the data is stored in memory, we get faster access to that data. So that data that's accessed more frequently is stored within the cache. Keep in mind that you do not store everything in the Elasticache. It is just the frequently accessed information that goes into your Elasticache. Now, how does AWS support Elasticache? Well, AWS supports Elasticache with two open source in-memory engines. And those open source mechanisms are Redis and Memcached. Memcached is the simpler option out of the two, but Redis cache has got a lot more features as compared to Memcached. Now, when it comes to this specific course, think about Elasticache when someone talks to you about accessing information from memory or caching information from the RAM, right? And also remember that the AWS supports two open source engines, which are Redis and Memcached. That being said about Elasticache, let's talk about another service from AWS called as Redshift. Now, Redshift is also part of the relational databases portfolio in AWS, but this is used for warehousing purposes. When you think about warehouse, it is about hosting massive sets of data. So you would use Redshift to process and host petabytes of data, and if you're working with applications that have business engines running on business intelligence platforms on AWS, you would use AWS Redshift. With this, you can run complex queries against massive, large sets of structured data. It is possible to do that because the data behind the scenes is stored on high performance disks, and that is why you can run extremely large queries in parallel without impacting the performance. So just to summarize, in this lesson, we spoke about two services in AWS, Elasticache and Redshift. Elasticache is for caching the frequently accessed data, whereas Redshift is used to process and effectively run large queries in parallel without impacting performance if you gotta host petabytes of data on AWS. Well, that's all for this lesson on Elasticache and Redshift. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.